Okay, time for another rant of the guru. So, people have asked me about curriculums, and particularly about Serak. So I was going to shed a little bit of light about that, how it was taught, why it's taught a certain way, and why it's not a certain way. You know, you see a lot of people now, there are some schools of thought where they have manuals and training passports and training manuals and stuff. I think that's okay, you know, but it was never like that. And this particular group was a group that came into the Detuar's Silat family, let's say. Well, they were never in the family, but they came in through the back door, and they set up this whole curriculum after Pentjak Paul died. The manuals are based on techniques and, you know, requirements, if you will. But things were never like that, okay? And maybe that works for the Westerner, but Silat in general was never structured the way people would like it to be structured, like karate or like, you know, Jeet Kune Do or something like that, where you have phases and different techniques per level and whatnot. It's a little bit different because this type of system, like Serak, is a system where you have components and fundamentals, and you have an alphabet that has to be trained all the time. So, really, things were always taught in threes, usually. Like you would get 3 jurus, or you would get three pieces of understanding, and then it's built upon those things. So, for example, a basic student would have the first 3 jurus, and then from the first 3 jurus, he or she would be expected to extract information, techniques, principles, counters, offensive and defensive structures. And then once that student could demonstrate proficiency in using those 3 jurus, then another 3 jurus would be added. So it would be basically based on the individual. It's not like if you have 10 people in a class, not all the 10 people at the same time are progressing. Everybody's progressing differently. So based on the student's knowledge and the student's ability to unconsciously use the material, in other words, they no longer have to think about a structure in Juru 1 or Juru 2 or Juru 3. It just comes out naturally when they're sparring or playing. Then the instructor knows, okay, it's time to give them more. So it was more of an intuitive-based knowledge. And if you imagine what it was like in the 1800s and 1700s and even before that for Silat, you realize that people didn't really write things down in books. Maybe they had a scroll or a manuscript with some basic principles or ideas, or a song or a piece of poetry that would express an energy or an understanding. But it was not like a 1,000-page detailed manual on every technique. Now, there are certain techniques that everybody should know in Silat, particularly in Serak. And we're going to talk from the point of view of Serak today. You know, everybody should know how to do a sweep, a front sweep and a back sweep, inside and outside of every leg. Everybody should learn how to do a knee bump or a knee compression, a hip bump or a hip displacement. Everybody should learn how to do a neck twist or a head twist, or what we would call Kapala. So you should know a sapu, beset, sabet, which is a small sweep similar to a sapu, but it's using the outside of your foot. Everybody should know kenjit, which is a compression of the body or a compression of the spine. Some people see it as a technique where they use their body to split the other person's body using the elbow. That's called a kenjit siko. But kenjit means compression, so anywhere you compress the body to make it topple over would be a kenjit. Then you have a darik. Darik is a pull. People think of darik as a head pull, pulling down or taking the temperature. But really, tarik is pulling. So you just need to understand anything that pulls the opponent is a tarik. And anything that pushes the opponent is a dorong. So combinations of tarik and dorong give you thousands of techniques. Any combination of pushing and pulling, or pulling and pushing. And then you add compression. So pushing, pulling, compression can give you a myriad of techniques. You don't even have to write them all down because there's thousands of them. So if you understand sapu, sweeps inside and outside, which is outside is luar, inside is dalam. If you understand beset, which are back sweeps, inside and outside. If you understand sabet, inside and outside. Gapet, which are leg pulls, which are also under the category of tarik, which if you understand pulling, and you understand pulling and pushing, compressing, decompressing, expansion, contraction, spiraling and unspiraling, you can come up with 1,000 variations of your Serak. So I think the old masters did not write this down simply because they understood the principles. There was no need to write it down. And I think what students need to know is it's more important for you to understand the principles. Write those down instead of writing 10,000 techniques. Okay? The techniques mean nothing if you don't understand those principles. Another principle that you have to have is opposite levers. So if the head is going one way, the body's going another way. If you pull an arm in one direction, the hip will go in another direction. So you're always looking to feed energy in 2 to 3 to 4 different directions simultaneously. That's an important principle. So anyhow, so for a student to progress, he or she would need to know the jurus, not necessarily just in performing them, but understanding what the motions mean combatively, what the motions mean from a holistic point of view, what the motions mean for a defensive and offensive, what the motions mean to disrupt energy in the other person, what the motions mean to give you structures, or how to break structures. The other thing that the student would need to know are the lankas, the platforms. We always start out with a straight line, and then from the straight line we work on the triangle. Then from the triangle we work on the zigzags, the 45-degree zigzags, the 60-degree zigzags, the 90-degree staircase. Then we work on the square, and we work on the double triangle, or the duatiga. Then we work on the cross, and then we work on combinations of any of these patterns within each other. And those are all different panjars. They all ultimately go into one panjar, but there's multiple variations of those panjars. Panjars is a web, okay? So usually students are taught one piece of that web at a time until they can understand it. And then from there they're given more understanding of more lines and angles and cross lines. And they're given more understanding of intersection of geometry and how that relates to alignment, how that relates to offense and defense, to strategy of takedowns, to strategy of where to strike, to strategy of how to collapse the body. And then we add the circle. So you learn how to use the circle as well. Some people would argue that the circle is not part of Serak, but if you really look at it and you take all the pieces together, you end up making a circle, or big pizza pie. And this is where you see the influence of Bakwa, or Bagwazan. You see the influence in there. The straight line work, you see the influence of Xingyi. And understanding the various energies on each line. It's not just about how to hit on the line, how to move on the line, how to intercept the line, how to attack a line, how to cut the line. It's also what energy do you drive on the line, or what energy do you dissolve on the line. Okay, so there's a lot to this understanding of lanka that goes way beyond just footwork. All right, then we have kuda. So in Serak you don't have a lot of kudas, but you have just the amount of kudas that you need. Mainly your front horse, your side horse, your full all the way to the ground silo, your sempak and dempak, your ground position silo, okay, your ground fighting posture, your narrow horse stance, which we call it the monkey stance, or the monyet. So you have different stances that are very common in all silats, but Serak happens to have them. If you were looking at it from the point of view of Harimau Minangkabau, you'll find that Serak has many of the same standing kuda-kuda, and a few of the ground ones too as well. Now, even though ground fighting is not necessarily the priority in Serak, it's there. You have some jurus that will teach you this. For example, in Pendekar Paul's jurus, you have Juru 11, Juru 17, Juru 7, Juru 9. All of these will teach that understanding. And when you look at your jurus, you have to understand it from 360 degrees. From being on the ground, from being on your knee, from being sitting, from being standing. So you always understand these motions. And same thing with the platforms. The platforms should be looked at flat. They should be looked at vertical, diagonal, different lines, different understandings, three-dimensional. Okay, so it's hard to set up a structured curriculum per se, and it's not necessarily necessary, because if you follow the progression of learning jurus, lankas, kuda-kuda, sambuts, sambutan, drills, the curriculum kind of unravels itself without you necessarily having to codify and bookkeep every little nuance of what you're learning. So my advice to people is don't stress over it. Don't try to, you can take notes and things like that, and you can videotape an instructor, but don't stress too much over exact details of a technique per se. Instead, stress over the principles and the fundamentals and the foundation and the basics, because those basics that you can train with yourself are the ones that are going to work when you train with a partner, if you have learned them correctly. Okay, so what does that mean? Make sure you train your jurus correctly with proper alignment, proper understanding of rooting, proper understanding of generating power or generating energy in your strikes. Practice your jurus with proper timing. Also, once you understand the juru in terms of its form, learn to practice it with explosiveness. We've talked about this before. Explosion means, or force equals mass times acceleration. So how do you explode? How do you make something more powerful? How do you add acceleration? All of these things have to be taught in the juru. And then the same thing goes with the lanka. Once you start studying the lankas, break down the lankas to how do you use it to step? How do you use them to kick? How do you use them to defend? How do you use them for target selection? How do you use your lankas for strategies, for taking down people, for folding people, for multiple attackers, for target selection? All of these things have to be considered. How do you use your different energies on those lines? Okay? How do you attack the line? How do you dissolve a line? How do you cut a line? How do you intercept the line? All of these things have to be taken into consideration. So Serak is a very complex art, although in the outside it looks simple. It is simple, but it takes time to learn. Okay? On average, a person or a student could learn the bulk of the fundamentals within 4 years, 4 to 5 years. And if he or she's a really gifted student, maybe in about 3 years. But it takes a lifetime to master these things. And I don't think that anybody ever finishes the art, because there's so much to learn. Every time you learn one piece, you discover a new piece. So with this, my advice is keep training. Make sure you have somebody who can teach you the fundamentals. Tell them to teach you the jurus. Tell them to teach you how to generate power on the jurus. And tell them to teach you the lankas properly. And also the sambuts, the sambutans. Some people say the sambuts are not important. I disagree. I think the sambuts teach positioning and timing, and they teach the proper unification between juru and lanka together. Okay? So anyhow, we can get more into this later on. I hope you enjoyed this chat. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. If you don't like it, then you probably have something wrong with your head. Take care. Bye-bye.